Hey guys, Mike from Backyard RC. Thanks for tuning in today for part 2 of our covering series. Today on this video, we're going to be going ahead and installing our fillets of covering in the tail section. We're going to be covering the tail of this airplane before we do the whole fuselage. So I'm going to go ahead here and start to prep up my covering. What we're going to be doing is laying pieces down along the seam about 1 inch wide. What that's going to allow us to do is when we cover in to our tail section from the rudder down and from the fuselage in, our seam's not going to have to be 100% perfect. If we tried to do it just covering the tail and just covering the fuselage, we'd end up with a gap down in this crack here, and that's not something you want. That's an area fuel and everything else can get in. So we're going to seal that up, and then we'll go ahead and cover the tail surfaces next, but we'll get to that one in the next video. If this wants to sit still for me. So I just have some of my covering here. I'm gonna make sure this is long enough. I want about 1 inch of overhang both ways. And that's gonna work out nicely. So I'm gonna cut myself about 1 inch long strip. I'm gonna square up both edges on this. Have a nice straight line. If you have a good straight line, you can basically make the seams on this Monokote completely disappear after the fact, so you won't even notice this was a separate piece. We're gonna start from the bottom and go up to the top. Same when we cover the fuselage. Again, leaving some overlap that won't allow any fuel to seep into the cracks or the lines where we overlap the covering. So that's gonna work out well. I'm gonna take my tack cloth here, which I've talked to you guys about before, and clean up this area that I'm gonna be covering, get rid of any dust on that. You can see it does pick some up for sure, even though we have gone over this airplane once with a tack cloth and used an air compressor. So I have my strip of covering. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the backing on this. There we go. You can see it's gonna sit in that seam. It looks like it's gonna want to develop some wrinkles, and it will. But we're gonna work our way and get those all out of the covering. So we're gonna start in the middle here and just seal it down. Going along our horizontal first. Getting into that crack as much as we can. Working out any wrinkles along the way, trying to keep it tight. The more wrinkles we keep out when we lay it down, the less we're going to have to shrink this covering, making our life a little easier. There you can see we've sealed that edge coming forward. So now I'm going to go ahead and keep going towards the front using the same method we just did. Putting a little tension on the covering here, trying to keep it tight and wrinkle free. There we go, we got the horizontal done. So this side's a little trickier. You can see it's naturally wanted to develop some creasing here. So this is where I'm gonna go ahead and make a little relief slit. When you're getting into compound curves, you can work a lot of them out with the heat iron, but because I'm trying to cover 2 sides at once right now, if I give myself that little slit, it's going to allow this piece to sit a little nicer on the way. So again, I'm going to start in the middle, coming up to the outside, trying to get all those wrinkles out. Now we have it tacked in the middle. These wrinkles will shrink out, so it's not a huge worry. I'm gonna tack it down the whole way, right in the crack. And we're gonna use a combination of heat and kind of pulling on that covering to work these wrinkles out now. I'm gonna grab my big iron here for a minute. Kind of pressing and working as many of those wrinkles out as we can right off the bat. We're just on our seal temperature right now, about 225 Fahrenheit. Just setting that covering, so we're not doing too much shrinking at the moment. Seal that edge down. And we're gonna come back. We've developed a little bit of wrinkling in the cracks. Gonna go ahead and turn this up to about 300 now. Give it a minute to heat up there, which will be more of a shrink setting. In the meantime, gonna make sure everything's sealed with this little guy. So as we work this out, using some pressure and working out all our wrinkles, like I've said, I get up to the front this time. I'm gonna adjust this cut just a little bit so it's right into the corner. I'm gonna go ahead and actually wrap that flap over the leading edge here. I'm gonna wrap this right up. Then I'm gonna go ahead and reseal this piece. Trying to do this so I can get you guys an angle of what I'm actually doing here. So seal this piece coming forward. And we'll bring it around. So unfortunately in this seam where you're seeing some of the little bubbles and wrinkling, I'll call it, that's the model underneath not actually being 100% perfect. There was some epoxy on this one from the builder that I couldn't get completely off without going nuts in the preparation stage. If you guys haven't checked out the prep video, be sure to check that one out. As I've mentioned there, the prep is really the key to a good finish on an airplane. So I'm gonna go ahead, I don't need this much on the front of it. Trim up some of my covering here. gonna seal that down. Make sure all the edges are good and sealed. Right up over into that top piece there. Now same thing. I'm gonna go ahead and trim this little piece of covering off. And there we are. So that's the bottom done. As you can see, once I've done the bottom, we're gonna be left with a little bit of a crack right in that piece. So I'm gonna show you guys how we're gonna deal with that one. Go ahead and tack that. Make sure you're working with the right side of the covering. Tack that into the fuselage there like so. And bring it up into the leading edge. Now when we cut that piece on the underneath, we cut it on a diagonal. So that's how we ended up with that little gap there. So this time, we're just gonna cut it down the leading edge on both sides. That's gonna allow us now to seal this piece down. Seal it about in line with that other piece we have on. It's not too important. Like I said, you can make these seams disappear pretty dang well. So here we get into the harder curves. A little more tricky area to cover, but just take your time. Working from the middle kind of out. I'm gonna seal these pieces down. And you can see now we're left with a sealed area on this side. Once we do the top piece the similar way, that'll seal off nicely as well. Trim off that little scrap, seal your edge down. Come back over to the top here. Just gonna trim a little bit of this off. When I'm cutting the covering on the fuselage, I'm pushing just enough that it cuts through the covering. I'm not going through the sheeting. And there we go. A step I missed when we were putting that last piece on, I forgot to finish off the back side here. So what I'm actually gonna do is that diagonal cut again from this corner. So get into that corner, trim the excess. That's gonna allow us to fold it up. On this back side, I'm gonna trim it flush. And we're gonna go ahead and fold that covering over and seal that piece down. Again, from the middle to the outside. Watch your fingers when you're using this iron. Very easy to burn yourself. I've been there many times before. Seal this little back flap over, coming from the edge down. I have this iron a little hot for sealing right now, so I'm going to use my little one. That one's more in a shrink stage. There we go. ahead here and trim our excess off. Just down along that rod. Get right into that corner. Where the plane meets this fillet, we're gonna give that a little slice there so we can pull that over the back. As I pull it, I'm gonna seal that edge and start to bring it down. See, it seals up nicely. Now along our little fairing, we're gonna give that a little slice. That's gonna allow us to bring this down. And we'll wrap it over the edge as well. And we'll seal that. And we're gonna trim off the excess. Make sure everything's sealed up nicely. All the edges are good. We're left with a pretty good base in that corner there. Like I said, it's not 100% perfect from the finish underneath, but where it is, down this back, you can see you get a nice smooth covering job. I'm gonna go ahead here and go over to the top side. I'm gonna do this actually in two pieces. One that's gonna go from here right to the back. Well, let's see. Let's see how it's gonna wanna act for me. Maybe I'll do it in one long piece. Let's do this in one long piece. It's got a couple compound curves, but I think we'll be able to work around that, so. We need it about that big, and we're gonna need a little longer this time. So, about 3 or 4 inches wide. As you can see, I left myself some extra at both sides. That's gonna work well, so let's go ahead and tack cloth out any dust that's still left in there. Take the backing off our covering here. There's an edge I didn't quite seal fully, so let's seal that up before we lay this down. Here we have our piece of covering. So a little different than last time. The first spot I'm probably gonna seal this is right on that compound curve. I'll work it from there down into the corners. Once we have that done, the rest of it will be pretty straightforward. A lot of this covering will get trimmed off after, so it's a big piece that makes it easier to work with, that's for sure. Just starting in the middle, sealing out, and sealing up into that first corner there on the rudder, or our vertical fin, I should say. We're working it from the middle into the corners. Not actually going into any of the sides yet though. So now I'm running to the point where it's about to hit that 90-degree angle. So I'm not going to have much choice but to seal right into the corner. So as I come down here, take your time on this, it's not a race. I'm going to start working it up on this fin. I'll start in the same area I've done the vertical, coming into the horizontal. Compound curve areas are a little tricky, so I'm just putting a little tension on, pulling out as many of the wrinkles as I can when I'm sealing it down. Like in the last side, we're going to have to make a relief slit there at some point. That a little too tight. Just peel it back in the area you